The post of Assistant Secretary-General of the United Nations is a high office, coveted by many in the elaborate structure of this international organization. Vitaly Vanshelboim, a graduate of a Kyiv university, became the first Ukrainian to make such a highly respected career in the UN. We've never done such a project in any other country of the world. It was probably a sign of fate, as I recall now. I was just reading a newspaper, and out of nowhere there was an announcement that the UN is looking to hire 3 new employees. Back then, nobody understood what the UN could be doing in Ukraine. At the time, 15 republics of the former Soviet Union became independent, and the UN decided to organize a separate office in each country.
И он решил в каждой из этих стран организовать независимый офис.
The same thing happened at the end of 1992 in Ukraine. The office decided to recruit several local employees.
Решил набрать несколько местных сотрудников.
I was the first of 2 Ukrainian employees that entered the tender and was hired. The tender was a huge event, and I was just 22 years old, so I still have no clue why they hired me. I've never left the UN system since the end of 1992. It's been 26 years now.
И так я остался с тех пор, с конца 92 года, уже из ООНовской системы не уходил, то есть уже получается сколько? 26 год.
Before being hired, Vitaly Vanshelboim was a young man, and the UN mission in Ukraine had existed for about 4 months. However, staff of the Ukrainian office managed to accumulate a large number of checks and accounting documents that needed to be put into order. This became the first task and the first opportunity to prove his skills and abilities. My boss at the time, a very renowned British man, gave me a bag filled with these receipts. The boss said he had no experience in accounting and added, "I'll give you a month to figure it out." At first, I was curious, as it was a big challenge.
Огромный вызов. Я помню первый год.
I didn't tell the management, but I hardly understood anything.
Ничего не понимал.
I had a decent education in accounting and learned English by accident. I didn't specifically study English in school or in university.
В институте я его не учил.
There was no connection at all when correlating Soviet accounting education, although the Soviet Union was on the brink of collapse at the time, and there were no international terms. Also, there was nobody to turn to for some advice.
Тоже было некого. Было очень интересно.
It was very interesting, yet difficult, but I managed. Then I began to climb the career ladder at a fairly decent pace.
Невидимая служебная лестница достаточно быстро подниматься.
In the early 2000s, a bankruptcy risk arose over the United Nations Office for Project Services. There were even talks about shutting the organization down, which never happened in all the years of the existence of the UN. I've never spent more than 2 years in the same post. Everything progressed very quickly. I started my current job at UN Ops in 2006, when the organization was going through difficult times. In fact, it was actually closing down. The bottom line was that the executive board, which includes 36 UN member states that are politically leading the UN Ops and 3 other large organizations of the UN system, decided that the organization is in such a difficult situation that it needs to be liquidated. This would have been a first in the history of the UN. Up until then, all UN organizations existed indefinitely once they were formed. UN Ops could have been the first one to go. The matter is that the organization in the UN system is fully self-sustaining. When it spends more money than it earns, then it is faced with a major problem. To resolve the crisis, 20 management schemes were implemented, and many processes were automated, which helped cut running costs by 30%. In 6 months, UN Ops underwent major reforms and survived. Over the past 13 years, the office has invariably remained one of the most effective organizations in the UN system. We survived simply by the fact that we didn't know how terrible the situation was. We thought that the organization owed about 20 million, though it turned out that there was 80 million. By 2006, there was a situation where the organization was losing money year after year for 4 years straight. Then I and our manager, a well-known Swedish diplomat, got appointed to this post and said, well, let's try for 3 months and see how it goes. We are ready to close the organization.
Как оно пойдет, мы все готовы к тому, чтобы организацию закрыть.
We didn't want to close it down because its mission is very important. There's no other organization like it in the world, and we wanted to save it.
Ее спасти.
Currently, we are the most profitable organization of the UN system, with huge reserves that can be invested in interesting and beneficial projects.
Запускать на инвестиционные проекты.
As of the end of 2018, UNOPS was operating in more than 80 countries all over the world and implementing more than 1,000 projects with a total annual budget of over $2 billion. UNOPS provides services to governments, intergovernmental organizations, international financial organizations and foundations, bilateral and multilateral donor organizations, organizations in the UN system, and also the private sector. Our offices are present in 85 countries all over the world, and we are implementing projects in 135 countries. The coverage is vast. All the more we don't work only in EU countries or on small islands. The second area is large-scale purchases. We know how to negotiate contracts with the large suppliers. We get decent discounts and pass them on to our customers. The third area, which was the original rationale behind the organization's creation, that is project management. We all believe that this is a fact because we develop major or small projects, though knowing how to correctly build a work plan, get everything done within the budget, spend money for the intended purposes, taking into account the client's wishes and the situation in the country, is actually an art and a science.
В рамках этого бюджета все деньги потратить по целевому назначению, учитывая пожелания клиента, все, что в стране и вокруг происходит, и уложиться в рамки, которые даны на исполнение этого бюджета.
We apply the world's best methodologies and hire the best specialists who have huge knowledge and extensive experience in this very specific sphere.
Которые знают, как этими вещами заниматься.
Since 2016, UNOPS has been implementing more than 12 projects in Ukraine to develop a transparent energy market and support reforms in healthcare and emergency rapid response, and ensuring public safety. These projects are developed in close cooperation with the EU and support from the governments of Canada, Japan, and international organizations like the Global Fund, USAID, and other UN agencies. The most important thing for us is to get as close as possible to a government's priorities, though this is not an easy task. There are a number of countries where these priorities don't always coincide with what an organization in the UN system should do. There may be issues with human rights and state mechanisms, but in Ukraine, what the government declares is an almost exact copy of what the UN wants to work on. In this regard, it's easy for us. We just need to implement high-level schemes through specific projects. The government declares what its priorities are, and we find a way to implement them. By the way, we came upon a direct invitation of the government and the president. We had no office here before. This was at the end of 2016. Prior to that, we executed certain projects in Ukraine, either from Copenhagen or from other nearby offices. But to implement serious projects in the country, there must be an official, full-fledged working regional office that is managed exclusively by local employees. In Ukraine, UNOPS, in partnership with the European Union and the EU Advisory Mission, is implementing a large-scale project called Pravo Police, which aims to support the reform of the law enforcement system, in particular the National Police, the State Bureau of Investigation, and the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine. The project aims to enhance the methods of combating cybercrimes and organized crime, create an effective witness protection system, expand cooperation between the Ukrainian police, Interpol and Europol, as well as introduce modern police tools, for example, intelligence-led policing, an approach based on systematic gathering and evaluation of data and information, turning it into strategic and operational analysis products. The project also focuses on the modernization of training and management system of the National Police and the introduction of modern information technologies. In partnership with the European Union, UN Ops has already renovated police stations, delivered personal protective equipment for police officers, procured specialized vehicles to ensure public order, and established the Strategic Investigations Department.
Я здесь не был уже довольно давно. Раньше я приезжал.
Quite some time has passed since the last time I was here. When the office was just opening, I visited much more often. What surprised me is that in the past, I would often get stopped for no reason while driving a car around the city. But now I haven't experienced this during a 3-day visit. It seems that laws and practices have changed for the better.
Не только законы, но и практика поменялась в лучшую сторону. Это очень заметно.
UN Ops also seeks to support the government in implementing comprehensive social protection programs. Upon the initiative of the Ukrainian government, UN Ops is also implementing a large-scale project, Baby Package, aimed at developing Ukraine's potential in the implementation of comprehensive social protection system programs for the population. The project procured more than 300,000 packages containing clothing and essentials for the care of newborns, totaling more than $35 million. Thanks to a transparent procurement system, it was possible to purchase significantly more than planned originally.
Один из проектов, который мы делали,
One of the projects we were implementing a year ago is the purchase of necessities for newborns at the request of the Prime Minister. We've never implemented such a project in any other country around the world. At the time, it was a huge priority for the government. Of course, there was nothing unique about what we did there, but nobody else could procure everything the government wanted in such a short time frame. And had the government assigned this task to some company, the issues of transparency would have been immediately raised. It was important for the country's image that an international organization with a solid reputation took care of this.
то вопросы транспарентности сразу бы встали. То есть даже для имиджа им было очень важно, чтобы это делала какая-то организация с очень солидной международной репутацией.
UN Ops also supports the Ukrainian government in implementing the European directives for the energy sector and promoting the development of the country's energy security. I know that there are several regions where wind energy can be used, and even more regions where solar energy is used. We focus on wind, sun, and somewhat on hydropower. This is a new topic and task for us, but if there are interesting organizations, we'll be happy to talk with their representatives. If we see that certain projects in these spheres are feasible, then we will definitely attract financing. The implementation of social projects based on partnership between the public and private sectors may become a new area of cooperation with Ukraine. Due to the established system of contacts with various banks and the private sector, as well as the apolitical nature of the organization's mandate, UN Ops can invest in interesting initiatives that are consistent and fully comply with the UN mission. Considering our specific nature, we decided to fulfill a niche that has long been empty up to this point. Our strength lies in infrastructure, and we know how to implement these projects all over the world. Given our impressive financial reserves, we decided to invest our money. If someone found out 5 years ago, they wouldn't believe that the UN can invest and make a profit from it. But we decided to do this because the need around the world is huge, and we have chosen 2 main sectors for ourselves. One of them is renewable energy, and the second is housing construction. There is a third small sector, construction of private medical clinics. We held talks with banks, private entities, and infrastructure funds, and we managed to convince them that it's worth investing in these sectors. The largest funds, which manage tens of billions of dollars, spend almost all of their money either in North America or in the European Union, because they believe that the risks there are much lower. We convinced them that if they invest in our direct participation, we'll be able to reduce risks in other countries like Ukraine. We have access to the best technologies in the world, and we can build 30 to 50% faster than traditional technologies would allow. The costs are 30 to 40% lower than the standard expenditures, but it's still difficult to say how much this will interest Ukraine, the people and the government.
Пока об этом сложно говорить.
Ukraine is one of the UN founding countries, which participated in writing of the organization's charter at the dawn of its formation. Today, Ukraine finds the UN rostrum an important tool for promoting its foreign policy. Ukraine is perceived by international organizations with great interest, but it largely depends on whom to approach. Even if you look at the 5 countries on the UN Security Council, opinions will be divided. What Ukraine lacks, and not just in the UN system, is competent lobbying. The country's image is almost everything, and Ukraine's image needs to be improved. The same thing has to be done in Brussels and many other key countries. This is an important point for the current leadership. This cannot just be forgotten or put to the wayside.
В других ключевых странах. То есть я думаю, это очень важный момент для нынешнего руководства, об этом нельзя забывать, и само по себе ничего не произойдет, над этим нужно работать. Тогда Украину все будут любить, в том числе и в ООН.